Thank you, Mike, and welcome everyone. So I'm excited about today's presentation. Eleanor Taylor from the Idaho National Labs is going to cover what they're doing there at the labs, not only around critical infrastructure, but some of the other activities. So at that, I'm going to turn it over to Eleanor, and we'll be monitoring the chat for questions, Eleanor, so we'll let you know if you want us to interrupt you or if you just want to wait and take those questions later. Let us know.
So I'm happy to be interrupted. I really love this to be an interactive discussion, and I just want to thank everyone for their time today. It's really an honor to be here to speak to you about some of the work that we're doing. I'm super impressed with everything NCyTE is doing. I think it's absolutely the right model of what our nation needs. So just appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to going through some of the capabilities and resources that we have available that hopefully can help accelerate some of the work that we're trying to do to address this critical issue for our country. So with that, I wanted to start talking about the national labs as a whole. And there we go. So I'm not sure how well everybody knows the national laboratories in general. There are 17 of us. We are dispersed across the country. By no means is Idaho National Lab the only lab that has workforce development or education opportunities as a part of our mission space. So just wanted to make sure that everyone had a sense of what the labs are, where we are. Basically, national labs are designed to do the things industry can't, shouldn't, or wouldn't for lots of reasons. So we do critical research in cybersecurity. The critical infrastructure protection is an area where INL has a specific area of focus, and that is kind of driven by our vision. So for those of you that don't know, Idaho National Laboratory is the lead nuclear energy laboratory. It's kind of what gave us our control systems expertise. But even though our vision is to change the world energy future, which is where a lot of people focus, they forget the second part is in securing our nation's critical infrastructure. And that's, incredibly important. I'm sure everyone here realizes that. But without our energy security, we wouldn't have economic security. We take for granted a lot of the energy resources that we have. When we flip a switch, the lights go on, or when we turn the faucet, we get water. That's not the case everywhere. And it's certainly something that we need to work really hard to continue to protect. A lot of our operational technology was developed long before there ever was this thing called the internet or the Internet of Things. So a lot of these physical capabilities, for all kinds of great reasons, including cost effectiveness, convenience, have been connected to the internet, and it's kind of changed the surface area of our energy security and how we protect that. So with that, I work in the National and Homeland Security Directorate at Idaho National Lab that owns that protecting our critical infrastructure mission. And we have several different areas, research areas that work together to address this. Because we have such a robust research portfolio in this area, we've developed a workforce development program office to help bring together these resources and find ways to help bring that to the workforce. So in particular, I focus on the industrial control systems cybersecurity, and we look at a whole host of different things, including threats, reverse engineering, cyber research, control systems engineering, all kinds of different pieces of the puzzle. And with that, we have a workforce development program office to address this issue, because in and of itself, it is a national security issue. And so what we're trying to do is drive a cultural change in engineering. That's a lot of what we'll talk about today. The enhanced partnerships, NCyTE is a great example of all different schools coming together to work towards this. And this is a perfect example of that. And obviously accelerating workforce development. And when we talk about this, this is an everything's on the table. This is, check the box above all strategies. So whether it's upskilling, reskilling, cross-skilling, looking at our future workforce, getting into high schools and middle school so that we can really start developing programs so that we're creating a sustainable talent pipeline for the future. Those are all of the things that we're looking at as part of this. And one of the reasons why is these gaps that we see in the workforce. So these are no surprise to anybody on this call. What you may not know is the whole reason I have this role working in workforce development, that's not typically something a national lab does. But when you see over 90% of our control system cybersecurity workforce needs are not being met, that is what I'm trying to address, and working with community like yours so that we can bring things to the table to start working on these issues. Now, I know earlier today we got to hear from CU, from the Office of the National Cyber Director. We were thrilled to be a part of this strategy, to see these strategies coming out. The strategy that they released in March, critical infrastructure protection, was the very first pillar. And now we've got the National Cyber Workforce and Education Strategy that came out at the end of the month in July. And we're hoping that we can bring some of our programs, some of our resources to help address that. And just like CU spoke about, this is an ecosystem approach. And one of the things that NCyTE's been doing since its existence is working to develop this ecosystem. So we are all in this together. There is no one size fits all approach. Some of the capabilities and things that I have are pieces and parts that we can bring to the equation to try to help address this need. And by no means are they all the ready answers, but I think if we work together as a collective, we can do more together than we can do apart. And so that's what I'm really hoping to do, is to drive a force multiplier as we look at critical infrastructure protection. So just a quick recap, when we talk about IT and OT, what are the differences? What's there? And I want to be really clear here, because sometimes when I talk about control system cybersecurity, it can be interpreted that I mean that the other types of information technology or cybersecurity, as most people refer to it, are not as important. And that's absolutely not the case. They are not mutually exclusive. They are both incredibly important for protecting our infrastructures. What I'm talking about or trying to illustrate is that there's much less attention currently on operational technology. There's all kinds of great, strong cybersecurity that exists in universities and community colleges focused around the IT environments. There's not quite as much when we look at operational technology. And even more importantly, we're not educating students or demonstrating the need to be able to understand the worlds that both of these live in, because a lot of times in our training that we do here, we'll get IT people that never really fully understood what OT people have to deal with, and vice versa. So there's real constraints that live on both sides of this equation, and helping people see both sides of it so that they can better understand and work together to protect ourselves. This is where we try to focus our efforts. So this is a quick, I'm sorry.
I was just going to make a comment about that difference, is having worked in an energy company with ExxonMobil, and when we were trying to bring our control systems into the integrated systems across the enterprise network, the biggest understanding of the operational technology by IT was some of the areas around availability is so important, and that availability of those systems can also impact those consequences around the product damage, the loss of life, and that includes the environmental issues around the community. So we at Exxon and others focused with and worked with the labs to help develop our best practices and our processes. Just thought I'd share that information with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stephen. And by all means, jump in anytime, because I much prefer this to be more interactive. I'm not here to really talk at you guys or tell you anything you don't already know, but we see this divide as being part of the problem that we have currently. And so we're trying to do things to bring these two worlds closer together, and at the same time, accelerate and create more programs so that people can start understanding the operational impacts and working to address those so that we kind of come more holistic in the future.
Yeah, and I would say one thing that recently talking with some of the Exxon, I still, even though I'm retired, I still have a contact there. And one of the things they've focused on is now they've integrated security with their safety. And as you know, most of the energy organizations, like in the refineries and the chemical plants, are very conscious and in all aspects around safety. So they have daily safety and security meetings in both the offices and in the field.
Well, and that's something that we'll talk about in terms of how do we bring cyber to the table, much like we do safety. And that's kind of the goal of some of the programs that we have in place. So these are just some of the programs that we'll be talking about today, just giving you a highlight of different things that are accessible to you, different ways that we might be able to work together to address this need and bridge the gap. One of the things, the first thing I wanted to talk about, and I know when they sent out the information about this talk, they talked about Cybercore, the Cybercore Integration Center. So the Cybercore Integration Center is both a building that I work in, as well as a program here at Idaho National Laboratory. So it can be confusing, but there's a lot of synergy between both of them. And when the building was built by the state of Idaho and we lease it back from them, one of the key selling points was this Cybercore academic collaboration space. So we have what we call the university lab here on site. And this lab is a collection of industry standard equipment and sector specific equipment so that we could start building exercises and capabilities and hands-on learning opportunities for students across the country. The Cybercore building opened in February of 2020, and the pandemic didn't send us all home in March of 2020. So the lab itself has only been operational for the last year or so because it wasn't considered mission critical. The Cybercore building has a very large classified space. Obviously, our university lab is not in that. But last year was the first year we were able to open and bring in interns to start working with us so we could develop some of the exercises and curricula that we could make available to other institutions. Now, as painful as COVID was, it did teach us some new tricks, and we were able to virtualize some of the labs and hands-on learning that we didn't ever do that before. And we utilize the NetLab platform, which a lot of you may be using, so that we can have a portal, an accessible point for any school or student to leverage some of the capabilities that we have within this laboratory. So a big part of our laboratory and the work that we do here is based on cyber-informed engineering. So the Department of Energy last summer released a national strategy on cyber-informed engineering. And really, this is more of a greenfield approach. And it's more about how do we bring cyber into the engineering field like we do safety, availability, cost. So engineers are thinking about cyber as they're designing their systems. They have some awareness of what this means in terms of physical impacts that can be managed through cyber means. And so when we talk about cyber-informed engineering, we're really trying to target the other types of engineering, not software engineers, not computer scientists. We know they're getting some of the cyber as part of their education, but what about the civil engineers? What about the mechanical engineers, the chemical engineers, all of the different types of engineering and technicians that if they better understood cyber when they're in the design phase or when they're in implementation, that they're able to protect the systems and make them more resilient. We're never going to engineer out all risk, but we can work on designs that make them resilient and give us better ways to fail safely than catastrophically. And we just had a cyber-informed engineering practitioners workshop last week, and there is a new implementation guide available from OSTI that is available to anyone. There's also a community of practice that surrounds cyber-informed engineering. There's an education group that meets. There's an implementation group that meets once a month. If anyone's interested in that, those are some of the websites that I can share with you as well. So another capability that we have in our Cybercore academic lab is the CyberStrike. So CyberStrike was developed by the Department of Energy for asset owners and operators. It is a self-contained kit that mimics the Ukraine attacks of 2015, 2016. It has guided labs that are already written. It has the interface where as people are putting in code, they're seeing things happen or not happen as they expect them to. So it's a great way for students to see the actual cyber physical impacts and real world case studies for them to work through and see this. So this is one of the training platforms that we have available. CyberStrike is also working on several other volumes. Lights Out is the Ukraine attacks. There's going to be one called Storm Cloud. There's one called Nemesis that looks at oil, natural gas. So there's several other versions that will also become available. The one thing that we've done with the CyberStrike machines that I have in the university lab is we've made them extensible. So as people are leveraging the training that we have, we want to be able to invite additional extensions of that training or other ideas. And to utilize our university lab, it doesn't cost anything for anyone. But what it does is anything developed using the equipment that we have has to be shareable to the community at large. I'm happy to put your university or community college logo on what was developed, but we have to make it available to everyone going forward. And another note on DOE and CyberStrike, I mentioned the other national labs. I don't know if everyone in this community is familiar with the Cyberforce competition. It's still open for schools and teams. It's a competition that focuses on the energy sector. The team event will take place in early November. It's an actual program that's built all around that includes individual competitions, different webinars and whatnot. So if you're not familiar with Cyberforce, I encourage you to take a look at that as well. Another thing that the lab has available that's available to all of you right now at any time is we do a lot of the CISA training related to ICS, again, utilizing the NetLab platform so that we can make it available virtually. So there are different levels. We have virtual training at the 301 level. As you do these virtual options, this is available to anyone at no cost. They can go to the virtual learning portal and register and start taking these opportunities. We also do offer the live event, the red blue training that's somewhat infamous here at INL. It's a great opportunity. The training doesn't cost anything, although you'd have to get yourself here to Idaho Falls to participate. The CISA of training includes, when you're here live, some of our cyber escape rooms, because what we did with COVID is we took a lot of the instructor-based training that we do as part of this, and we made it available virtually. And then we introduced the escape rooms as some of the team building, critical thinking, communicating exercises leading up to the red-blue culmination of the training. And if you're at Moraine Valley next week for the National Cyber Education Colloquia, we'll be running those escape rooms there. So I encourage you to participate. We would love to take those escape rooms and make them available to community colleges and universities and even in high schools and community events, so that we're building that awareness and getting people to start to understand and see cyber differently. Not all cyber is going to be programming. Not everybody is a hacker in a basement. There's all different components to cybersecurity, and we really want to open up the aperture so that people can see how multidisciplinary this field is and all of the different capabilities and roles that are available for them in the future. So the industrial control system collaboration, we have a community of practice. This includes over 350 participants. I think we have 25 different countries that are participating. It demonstrates the need that exists for better understanding how do we address industrial controls. We have 3 different subgroups. I already talked about cyber-informed engineering. We also do one specifically on education, training, and standards, and then one on workforce development. So this is an opportunity to participate as well in our community of practice and be a voice and help bring this together. What's really interesting about the demographics of this group is it is almost a perfect third, evenly split between government, academia, and industry that participate. And I hope you'll join us in the future. One of the outcomes of our community of practice and the work that we've been doing with DHS is trying to better understand the workforce development gap that exists. And we've all been grappling with this. We all know it exists. it's really hard to even find the pipeline because we don't even know where to start. And so we started doing some research looking at this and looking at how organizations work to address this. Where are they getting their talent? Are they developing it themselves? Is it coming out of school? Where there's so many different layers to this problem. And I know this is somewhat rudimentary, but it is not a cyber issue. This says it's a business strategy issue. I would even take that one step further. It's a people issue. Cybersecurity is about people. We create the technology, we use the technology, we are the ones that are involved. And so this is really trying to take it back and look at things more fundamentally and start understanding where we are, what we have, and what we need. Because cyber has grown so exponentially, both in the threat space as well as the training and capability, it gets really lost in the weeds in terms of what people need, and they don't even know where to start, and they just start reacting. And so we're trying to bring some foundational knowledge into this. So as people come to us, come to you looking for training and education and solutions to address these gaps, we can at least give them a foundational understanding of where they're at, somewhat like the Six Sigma approach to cybersecurity. So we've developed what we call the Cyber CHAMP model, which stands for Cyber Competency, Health, and Maturity Progression Model. It's a mouthful, but what we're trying to do is overlay several different assessments so an organization can better understand where they're at and develop their workforce, but even more importantly for educators, understand exactly where that gap is, because it's not always the same by industry, by region. So we're trying to really bring data to that, creating sector-specific dashboards so we see some of the trends that exist within energy or oil, natural gas, or the different sectors so that we can better triage where these gaps are and help address them. Another program that isn't really specifically at the university or community college level, but I love this program, and I'm wondering if perhaps in the future we couldn't design something specifically either for the educators or for the students that is more of a cohort of opportunity to better understand OT security, create an opportunity to work across different institutions and give them exposure to all of the different capabilities that exist within the federal government to help work through some of the issues. So as we all know, Department of Energy has a large portfolio. Certainly CISA has a large portfolio in this space. Department of Defense has a large portfolio, and there's all kinds of programs that exist nationally that can help us address and create a stronger future. But connecting the dots, coordinating, communicating is sometimes difficult. Again, we're also heads down trying to accomplish what we're doing, that sometimes we miss these broader objectives. And I thought that this program was certainly something that does a great job of cutting across some of these things for a specific audience and perhaps could be repurposed for other audiences. Another capability that we have here at Idaho National Lab is consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering. Now, I talked about cyber-informed engineering earlier. That's more of a greenfield approach. How can we help train engineers and help in the design phase so that they are thinking about cyber earlier? But what do we do with where we are now? And we do a lot of work, a lot of assessments here with a lot of corporations and industry partners so that we can help them better understand how to defend themselves in terms of cyber threat. And the real key here is to think like an adversary. Let's assume they are already in our systems, and unfortunately, more often than not, they are. And if they are, what is the most vulnerable? What are the things that we need to protect and work backwards? So this is a phased model. There is training that exists around this. There are boot camps. There's opportunities to embrace this. But this is one of the ways that we've worked with industry to help better prepare them and have many case studies and opportunities that we can work in terms of whether it's training people to understand this methodology or working to help better bring this to businesses. This is another way that CCE and CIE work together. So you can think of consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering as a subset of cyber-informed engineering, and there will be a whole umbrella of ways that we can work together to address this. Now I'm getting close to done, but this is probably one of the most important parts that I think we cannot overlook. We have to think about the future pipelines. I'm doing a lot of work at the post-secondary level to help triage the control system cybersecurity side of things. But if we are not reaching down into our high schools and, quite frankly, middle school to find ways to get students engaged and start thinking and bringing this curricula into the classroom, we're only going to hurt ourselves and never address the real problem. Now, it gets more challenging because we can't just keep dumping more and more on our teachers and expecting them to be able to teach everything and bring this. So we have to find ways that we can better integrate and take some of what we have and make it accessible to students and teachers. And getting the parents involved as well. There are great career opportunities for these students. There are opportunities, and we just need to find better ways to be innovative so that we're getting into the classroom and taking these messages. If we get students aware of cyber earlier and in more visceral ways, we will have the workforce of the future that we need. But we have to make sure, as we work to build solutions where we are now, it's a lot easier for me to reverse engineer some of the capabilities that we've developed for industry, for asset owners and operators, and try to make it available at the university and community college level, and then perhaps even further at the high school level. But I really need to get down to middle school. And we also have to start capacity building from the top up. So we need to look at building, in a perfect world, what would middle school cyber education look like? How could we bring some of that cyber physical? Because those are the aha moments when students see a light bulb go off on a breadboard based on some code that they wrote. That is just things that sticks with them, and they better understand some of the things that we're talking about and how those two worlds converge. So I wanted to just kind of recap all of the different capabilities and opportunities for us to work together. The DHS virtual learning portal has all of that training available to you and your students. It costs nothing to register and utilize those. I talked about the DOE CyberStrike training kits. We went through some of these tools. I didn't talk about CSET. I know Stephen probably knows more about CSET than I do, but that's a free cybersecurity self-evaluation tool, very comprehensive, can be downloaded and utilized. You can create a subset of that. They're actually using CSET in the Cybersecure Florida initiative, where they're working with all of their different electrical operators, municipalities, to better understand where they're at. So they're leveraging that tool there. Malcolm is a great opportunity to look at network traffic. Again, a free open source tool that you can download. We have an all hazards analysis tool that we have here. All kinds of things are available from our critical infrastructure protection page. And then, we did talk about the community practice, some of the working groups, the K through 12 outreach that I think is really important for us, and anything that we could do to work better together. I think we can pilot things. I'm happy to try to take the different capabilities we have and find ways to make them more useful, more beneficial for your audiences, and try to work together so that we could help address this larger need. So with that is all I have for you today, but I welcome any questions, suggestions, anything else you might want to throw into the chat that I cannot see.
Thank you, Eleanor. There was one question about the, could you share, do you have the links to the training that was the CISA training? But I think someone put some of those links in there for CISA training.
I posted it out there, Stephen.
Right.
Because I'm using it in my classes already.
Yay. That's great.
So yeah, I will say that a lot of our curriculums around SCADA especially started with our relationship and partnership with the Idaho Labs, and at that time Department of Homeland Security, I guess now CISA, but working really close with them, and so they have so many great resources. So do we have any questions for Eleanor from anyone? You can either put it in the chat or just unmute yourself and ask the question. Okay.
Hey, Eleanor, great presentation. I'm just kind of curious in terms of, you mentioned that it's hard to put a finger on what the workforce demand is in ICS and operational technology. Do you have any sort of data that you've produced that gives some indication on the employment gap?
So we were just talking to the Department of Energy about this yesterday, Brent, and it's a great question. It's really hard to quantify. I can tell you that there's huge gaps. I have a colleague that described it as, ICS is not a direct flight. You have to get somewhere first before you get to kind of the control system side of things. And it's really challenging because the sector, we're facing three kind of perfect storm issues. One, we're dealing with a lot of retirements in this space. So people that are really versed, well aware of how everything works, have been in that role for a long time, are getting ready to retire. New people coming in don't have that continuity or context as they're moving into these roles, and the organizations themselves don't always quite understand some of that capability. So there's a big gap there. There's also a gap in terms of what the skill set is, because a lot of the control systems that, a lot of the critical infrastructure protection roles that we see with utilities and munis and all of that are somewhat homegrown. So it's harder to track, and we're trying to come up with different models to help not only what that pipeline looks like, but as I think probably many of you were on earlier this week when CUMO presented, there's a real HR gap in between what we're hiring, what we say we need, and what we actually need, and trying to address that. Because I don't know if you've seen it. One of the things that I hear from students a lot is, we're great at advertising how much cyber need there is and how much money you can make. And yet, as they come out of school with newly minted degrees, they can't seem to find a job, which is super frustrating for the students, because we're advertising, we have 800,000 unfilled roles, and, the mean cybersecurity salary is $102,000, and they can't even get a call back for an interview. And yet we're seeing job descriptions written as entry level with a CISSP. And so there's a big disconnect between, and there's not a job code. There's not for industrial cyber, there's not an easy way to differentiate this particular field. So there's kind of a perfect storm of many things going on right now. It's a great question. I don't have an easy answer for you.
So I don't know if you're familiar with an individual named Dennis Scarr from Everett Community College here in the state of Washington. He's been working on developing a registered apprenticeship for operational technology, and he was on a hiring board for the Seattle PUD, and had a bunch of individuals that were being interviewed that had master's degrees in cybersecurity, had plenty of experience, but when they were asked about SCADA or operational technology, they sort of weren't able to address those questions. And the person that got hired was out of Whatcom Community College that had gone through their industrial control systems program. And, as I believe they were a 4-year student, but it goes to show that this training is really in high demand if people have the right skill set and are able to get those jobs. So whereas we're facing a lot of these instances where students are struggling to find a job with a general cybersecurity degree, this is kind of one area that people are getting picked up fairly easily. But yeah, I guess I'm kind of curious on folks' thoughts about an apprenticeship program in this field, just because electrical workers don't necessarily have that technology background. And one of the challenges that we're seeing with getting this registered apprenticeship going is that the hiring managers are focused on union jobs and don't want to unionize a technology job, which is more on the administrative side, whereas the CISO side is looking for how to break that pillar and get their security measures in place. So there seems to be a disconnect on getting this off the ground. So just kind of curious on anyone's thoughts on that type of an approach.
The only interaction I've had in that is with our here in New Mexico. They're in Lincoln County. There's 4 wind farms, and so the SCADA portion of that, working with those technicians. We don't actually have an internship program in place, but through the CTE side of our college, they're introduce security as part of the SCADA and for the operators and the maintenance folks in the farm itself. So, but that sounds pretty interesting as far as having something like an apprenticeship program or even an internship program in that perspective. But,
well, and certainly hands-on learning, and the idea of apprenticeship is a perfect concept for what we're trying to do. Sometimes registered apprenticeships can be a little bit more difficult to orchestrate. I know some companies are doing it in an unregistered way. They don't get the same kind of credit from Department of Labor, but then they don't have the same overhead as a way to kind of bring students in. I'm also aware of Siemens Energy started an ICS apprenticeship working with schools in Maryland and in Idaho, as a matter of fact, trying to get that off the ground. So there are different models. I do think we want to find one that works in this space. And I get the constructs, and some of this again goes back to the job code. We don't have a job code for this. Like it doesn't have its own entity. And I think some of that needs to be addressed as well, because we don't have the data, and then we also don't have one to tie it to. We can align it with one of the other ones, but I think it's deserving of its own category. It would help with some of the confusion. Because there's already so many semantic issues in cybersecurity, and it's hard for people to track. And when it gets confusing and overwhelming, it's just easier to ignore.
Glenn, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, Brent brings up some good points in here about, when the internships and apprenticeship programs and that. I know from down here, and I'm just trying to get off the ground here. One of the areas that I'm going to try to reach out to is the municipalities, because they're taking over the IT offices within a lot of the municipalities down here. They're actually running the ICS programs, like the water systems and the sewer systems and that, which you got to start someplace small. I don't want to try to jump into the large industries because they don't know exactly what they want at this point. I do know that I developed my program down here primarily to give the IT students a bit of what OT is, and so they can work within that 3.1 sphere up there, or 3.5 sphere, and understand. And the reason that came about was my time with the Air Force and looking at the people running the IT systems, handing out a laptop to a person that goes out to the aircraft, and the technician on the aircraft, which is basically big flying ICS. And they're plugging this in, but nobody understands the security relevancy between the two. So I can't, as Eleanor was saying, there's a lot of talk and a lot of stuff going on the engineering side, trying to bring this, focus within what they're doing. But I try to take it from the other side, because that's where I live, on the IT side, to get that focus to understand what that other area is. And then those are the students that I'm trying to get into the small municipalities out here to supplement their IT office and have that knowledge when they go out there and they're having to deal with the traffic control systems, they're having to deal with the water systems, that they can contribute because they understand how that technology actually functions a bit more. And that's kind of where I took this course and where I'm going with it. And so the other part of it is if they understand this, the security controls within, the framework of what we're working with, and I built it around NIST, of course, that you got 1,100 plus controls, which ones you put in place and how is it going to affect anything? And so, instead of trying to teach RMF at the business level, at the manager level, I want the students to understand the relevancy of what they're actually going out there and implementing. And that's where I'm trying to get off the ground down here. It's slow moving. I know Eleanor and I had this conversation when she was down here in April about that. But with all the influx of technology coming here to Arizona, I really want to get this moving down here. And I think, we have to start small. I do know that the Air Force had taken their control systems within the civil engineering area, and they basically walked into the IT shop, who was basically managing the computers for the organization, and said, oh, by the way, here's another role for you. And this was as I was leaving the Air Force, and I got a call from a friend up there, and he was having to go and take the ICS training for RMF as a certification so that he could work within that sphere to begin with. So, I see it, but if the Department of Energy and Department of Labor can help us by trying to do some type of survey out there within government and in industry itself to find out what cybersecurity skills are needed within the ICS area, instead of from the engineering side, looking at the IT people coming in and supplementing that area, might be something. One of the people I talked to not too long ago was working in the power industry in Florida, and they actually have two sets of cybersecurity people, one at the enterprise level and one at the 3.5 level. And they deal with different firewalls on both sides of that. They don't touch each side. The 3.5 guys, all they do is the stuff on the ICS side to make sure that's secure, and they don't touch anything on the enterprise side going out to the internet. So there is definitely, I can see a break in there, but I think from the IT side and the cybersecurity realm, we need to get better numbers out there so we can promote this. If INL and Department of Energy can help on that.
Okay, great comments, and thank you. There's a Faith Bryant has put in the chat that I am a work experience coordinator. I help create internship opportunities for students. Some of the pushback I receive from the companies is they can't have an intern work in cybersecurity. So I think there is some opportunity to help business understand how they can use interns in that space.
I agree wholeheartedly, Faith. I'm surprised that that's pushback that you're receiving, only because your students, they have a vantage point. They have an awareness that those of us in industry have been working a while, and they have an energy that they bring to the table. And, I get that you can't give them the keys to the kingdom, but there are many projects that they could be directly involved in that would help supplement some of the cybersecurity. And I will tell you, when I was talking to you all about consequence-driven cyber-informed engineering, we had 2 interns working with us on case studies related to that project. And they said to us, wow, this is so interesting. I really wish I understood this when I was in school. It's starting to make more sense to me now, how this all comes together. And they were the impetus between the Accelerate is the acronym. I won't get into what it stands for because we love acronyms, but Accelerate training is how we bring CCE into companies and corporation. Their perspective was what created the Accelerate course for academics specifically. And if the interns didn't see that, if they didn't bring it to our attention, that would not even exist. So I think they're really limiting themselves if they don't bring that different viewpoint. Just like everything else about cyber, it's multidisciplinary, and we need the diversity of thought. And new students are coming at this without some of the myopic views or things that we see or things that we know have been done and didn't work that could work with their experience and expertise. So if there's anything we could do to help with that, and certainly INL, we have a very strong internship. If some of your students want to look at working here, they don't necessarily have to come to Idaho. They used to have to do that. before COVID, but like I said, we learned some new tricks. So that could also be an opportunity.
Great, thanks, Eleanor. There was a comment in there that the trying to sign up for the ICS op, that survey didn't work on the website, just so you'll know.
Oh, great. I will definitely take that note.
So one thing I can addressing the IT versus the operations side at many organizations. I know in our InfraGard special interest group for energy here in Houston, they have talked about this in the organization overall, and most of the oil companies, I think, energy companies, at least the large companies, our career development through those organizations is that if you're in IT, you're probably going to have a stint in the engineering side and in the refinery, in the chemical plant, to understand the operations. In the same way with the people in the engineering and the operations area, and it also ties into other. It kind of goes back to our SciAD. Cyber is in all kinds of disciplines, but the whole idea is, I think what's key for education for students is to understand, first of all, they understand the business. And I think that's a key. You have to understand what the business is, and then cybersecurity and IT and the control systems are enabling that business to work and to make money, which is what the stockholders are looking for. So I think that's a perspective a lot of people don't get, and we don't actually implement a lot of that into our education. I think I'll make a plug for the NCyTE Career Challenge. That really takes and puts all that together into one capstone type class. It's 160 160 work hours over 10 weeks. Pretty intense, but it's worth going. So you keep an eye out for that coming up maybe next semester. I don't know. We'll have to see what Mike says about those things. But anyway, the other thing is trying to address or reach many disciplines, but also in the K through 12, along with those past that are already graduated high school. Organizations and conferences like the ACES conference, which was the American Indian Science and Engineering conference, that's coming up in Spokane in November or October. I'm sorry, in October. Those are good examples of where these students can learn more about how cybersecurity and cybersecurity awareness, both in their engineering disciplines and their science disciplines as well. So I know NCyTE will have a booth there. Probably INL has a booth there. I think they've had in the past. So
right. Well, and I think those are all great points, Stephen. Like, we can do more in these conferences. We can do a lot together to raise awareness. And Glenn, you mentioned about DOE. I do know that CSER is looking at addressing some of that bigger portion of getting the market surveys and coming up with other ways to reach the workforce. And one other great resource that I've come across recently that might be of interest is the Center for Energy Workforce Development has created an energy fundamentals course. It's targeted at high schoolers, like juniors and seniors, could also be utilized in community colleges, but it goes through the business of energy and is online. It's really well done, and we are providing the cyber bonus content, so we can bring in that cyber critical infrastructure protection, so students start to see the bigger picture. And so that's, some of, I think, our biggest problem is there is a lot of capability that exists, but we're not really well connected or coordinated. So I just want to do whatever I can to help bridge those things, because we've got a really big mission to meet. And I apologize, I should have my email address on here, but it is, and feel free to put it in the chat, eleanor.taylor@inl.gov. It's pretty simple. If you can't get on the COP website, if there's some material that you're looking for, our website's not the easiest to navigate. feel free to reach out. I'm happy to get you any resources. I'm happy to have discussions on ways we could do better together, because I think that we have investment in things that exist. And if we could elevate them, if we can tune them, if we can find a way to make it work better, let me know. I can't promise I can do it, but I will promise I will listen and try to find a creative way to address it.
I put your email in the chat, so
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen.
you're welcome. Okay, any other questions, comments before we only have a few minutes left, so I'll turn it. Thank you so much, Eleanor. This was a great information, great presentation. The labs have so much to offer. It's just an amazing resource that a lot of people don't know about. And I'm telling you, I'm a believer there when it comes to working with the lab. So I'm going to turn this over to Mike, and you can wrap everything up. Thanks.
Yeah, again, thanks everybody for attending. Great conversations. Eleanor, I think you gave us 2 or 3 more topics that we can use for our NCyTE member meeting, which is awesome. I'd really like to dig down into like the K-12s. How do we really approach students and get them involved with cybersecurity? Because there's still, when you say cybersecurity to somebody K-12, they kind of gloss over and they're not really sure what you mean by that. But so there's that. There's the workforce and how do we work, get people involved with that. A lot of good work. So I put our link in the chat earlier. Please fill out the survey. We are always looking for topics and presenters. If you're interested in presenting on at the monthly meeting, you can see how valuable this is. We encourage you to do that. I don't have anything else to say. We'll just wrap this up a few minutes early, if that's all right with everybody.
That's fine.
Okay, well, thanks everybody. Thanks again, Eleanor.
Yes, thank you.
We'll see you next month.
We'll see you. Actually, Eleanor, we'll see you next week, and
Yeah.
hopefully a lot of our members will see you next week. So thank you, and if come by and visit. I think I'll be at a couple of booths. One of them's is the booth for the what is the one I'm trying to think of for the CAE?
Cyber skills to work.
Yeah, cyber skills to work, and so please come by and we'll look forward to seeing you there. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.
Okay, you too.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.